The Lights Beneath Svalbard, Episode 1, The Blueprint Package. I don't usually begin a case file with the packaging it arrived in, but in this instance, the envelope itself was the first warning. No stamps, no postmark, no return address. Just a beige, chemically treated paper that felt almost waxy to the touch, the kind used to store documents that shouldn't absorb moisture. Whoever sent it knew I would understand the significance and the risk. It was left outside my door early in the morning, leaning against the frame like a polite visitor too shy to knock. The temperature that night had been below freezing, yet the envelope felt strangely warm when I picked it up, as if it had been carried under someone's coat moments earlier. I looked both ways down the street. Empty. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel watched. Inside the envelope were 3 items. The first was a folded set of architectural diagrams printed on thick blueprint paper. The second was a microcassette wrapped in a slip of plastic and labeled only with a marker, Night Cycle 14, fragment. The third was a single handwritten note on lined paper, torn from a notebook. 4 words: do not open the lower shaft. No signature. But the handwriting was steady, deliberate. No tremor of panic. Whoever wrote it believed this warning to be a simple fact. Now, before I continue, I want to make something clear. None of this came from my own experience. I wasn't in Svalbard. I never set foot anywhere near the coordinates later mentioned in these documents. Everything I'm about to recount comes directly from the material inside that envelope and from additional sources who contacted me after I began cross-referencing certain facility codes. My role in this is simply to read what others recorded and piece together what I can. I began by unfolding the blueprints. They were for something titled Station K31, though the K designation didn't match any of the known Norwegian or international research facilities I had studied before. Most Arctic stations use standardized identifiers tied to funding organizations, universities, or governmental branches. K31 appeared to be unofficial. The design suggested a modular subterranean station, constructed in phases. The main structure sat roughly 20 meters below surface level, encased within layers of reinforced concrete and steel bracing. It featured sleeping quarters, a communications room, a sample analysis lab, and something labeled Seismic Observation Wing. But the most interesting part of the blueprint wasn't the layout, it was the absence. On the right side of the diagram, a vertical shaft descended far deeper than the rest of the station, more than 60 meters into the permafrost. Where you would expect structural details or depth markers, the paper instead showed a rectangular void. No walls, no material indicators, no engineering notes, just an empty shaft descending into nothing. At the bottom of the void, a single word was typed in red ink: restricted. Above ground, no access points were drawn. It was as though the station had been built around a pre-existing cavity, something they found and then decided to study. I studied the blueprint for several minutes before turning my attention to the microcassette. I don't personally use analog recorders anymore, but I keep an old microcassette deck for cases exactly like this. When I slid the tape inside, the recorder made a faint mechanical whir, the kind that tells you the motor hasn't been used in years. The recording started with static, long, dragging static, broken occasionally by the sound of boots on a metal walkway. Then a voice, distant, breathless, almost swallowed by the background noise. Night cycle 14. Log begins. Power fluctuation still unresolved. A male voice, late 30s perhaps, Norwegian accent. The timestamp was corrupted, but based on the inflection and cadence, it was clearly intended as part of a routine field report. He spoke about the seismic readings first. Anomalous responses deep below the station, rhythmic pulses that did not correlate to plate movement or ice cracking. These pulses were measured in repeating intervals, too regular to be natural. The team believed it might be a form of subglacial water movement at first, but the thermal readings contradicted that theory. The pulses were warm, faintly, but consistently. That alone shouldn't have been possible. At that depth, the ice should have been stable, cold, and silent. The voice shifted, becoming slightly more uneasy. Team reported knocking again. Same interval as before, 3 short, pause, 1 long. I paused the tape. Knocking. Arctic researchers occasionally report acoustic distortions from ice itself, pressure shifts, settling, thermal constrictions, sounds that can resemble booming cracks or echoes. But knocking suggests intent, pattern, rhythm, and the fact that the researcher described them with again meant it was recurring. I pressed play. We attempted correlation tests, tapped back using standard comm frequencies transmitted through the shaft wall. Response came 12 seconds later. Identical pattern. Inverted. Inverted. Meaning whatever responded had not only heard them, but recognized the pattern and repeated it in reverse. Either intelligent behavior or an extremely improbable natural coincidence. Neither explanation was comforting. At this point in the recording, the sound quality degraded. There were faint scraping noises in the background, like something shifting across metal or ice pressing against a reinforced structure. The tape hissed. The man, breathing heavily, continued, "Light seen again, faint blue, lower shaft, instructed to postpone descent until structural team verifies." The recording cut off abruptly, followed by a few seconds of silence, then a loud, sudden knock. Not static, not distortion. A hollow, resonant knock, as though something struck metal from the inside of a confined chamber. Another knock followed, then a third, perfectly spaced. If you've ever been in a quiet room where someone knocks on a wall, you know that feeling, the physical vibration more than the sound itself. Even through old analog tape, the knocks carried a weight that unsettled me more than I care to admit. The tape clicked. End of side. I leaned back and looked again at the blueprints, at the empty shaft, at the warning note. Do not open the lower shaft. Whatever was inside that void, the team had tried to study it, tried to provoke a response, and something responded. I placed the tape aside and unfolded the final sheet tucked inside the envelope. A printed page from a research log, partially redacted. It described unusual thermal anomalies detected beneath the station, including a spike in subsurface luminosity, a glow, that did not correspond to any geological explanation. Words like bioluminescent and unknown energy profile were scribbled in the margins. Someone had circled a line in thick pen. Structure beneath ice appears dynamic. Not alive, not moving. Dynamic. a careful, deliberate word. The log ended with an unfinished sentence. We cannot determine whether it is reacting to us or anticipating us. The pen stroke trailed off mid-letter. At the bottom of the page, an unsigned note had been added. Next descent scheduled after night cycle 15. There was no mention of night cycle 15 in the envelope. I stared at the documents for a long time. The blueprint, the warning, the tape with its hollow, deliberate knocks. Someone had gone to great effort and great risk to make sure I saw this. But before I could even begin forming a hypothesis of what happened at Station K31, I needed more context. And as it turned out, context was already on its way to me. Because later that evening, just after sunset, another envelope appeared at my door. This one was heavier, and it wasn't warm. It was ice cold,